to do things that put the spin on the subject that you want. For example, if your long-term agenda is to be able to militarize space and keep the whole military-industrial sector going, but expand it into a multi-trillion-dollar issue globally eventually, what better way to do it than to trade international conflict for interplanetary? It's sort of like what Ronald Reagan said on 5 or 6 different occasions in the 80s. And in so many words, and he said this to the Council on Foreign Relations, at a speech at the UN, and a meeting with Gorbachev. And he said, wouldn't our job of creating world unity and world peace be easier if we had a common alien threat to unite against? Now, that's the kind of thinking operating. Now, I think Reagan was being manipulated by some of his handlers, one of whom I know is a MJ-12 person, control group person. But my point here is that if that is an agenda that's operating, if you're going to have people accept the costs, the extraordinary costs of militarizing space and of engaging in this kind of conflict-oriented relationship with non-human life forms, you're talking a lot of money. And like I said, if you think the Cold War was expensive, that was a blue light special compared to what this is going to cost. And my point very clearly is that there are counterintelligence and psychological warfare components of this that I think have tried to spin this subject in a direction that is negative, xenophobic, and fear-driven. Because you've got to hate your enemy. It's like what Hitler had to do to the Jews. I mean, you've got to demonize them. You have to have these ugly character, sort of portrayals and all these sort of things. Well, I think, unfortunately, that has been happening with the extraterrestrial issue. And I think it's been subtle. It's been coming in through our pop culture and other things. But there are other things that have happened that are more direct interventions. I know of a world leader who was kidnapped, made to look like an abduction, to stop him and some others from doing what he said he's planning to do. A head of state of a European country told me this, and he knew because he knew the man personally. Now, that's what you're dealing with here. So a lot of our leaders are intimidated by that. All right? So you have what I call the real phenomenon, and then you have the Memorex. All right? And is it real or is it Memorex? Because once you have electronic systems, communication systems, and other things that have been reverse engineered from extraterrestrial materials, I've been studying this now for 50 or 60 years, and you can apply it to things that look like a duck and quack like a duck. You know, hey, you think it is a duck, but it isn't. And this raises another question. I spoke of this in Orange County night before last, I guess, Wednesday night. Seems like a month ago. And an interesting comment I made to the folks there is that, I don't know how many people here remember the Gulf of Tonkin incident, the Vietnam War era, where in so many, or what we did was basically stage and hoax and exaggerate an attack on our military assets in the Gulf of Tonkin to make the North Vietnamese look like they had more power, more money, more everything than they had. And we did this so we could get more funding from the Congress and expand the war in Vietnam. So it was a counterintelligence program that was basically a hoax. The term is false indications and warnings, military war college parlance. But that, I'm afraid, is probably what's going on a cosmic scale, where things are being hoaxed and information, disinformation is being put out there for the purpose of setting the stage for eventually being able to convince people that we need to engage in interplanetary war. I think it was Douglas MacArthur, and when he gave his swan song speech to Congress, said, the next world war will be interplanetary. Now, I think that's ridiculous and totally unnecessary. But we need to do the right, we need to take some actions to avoid doing things along those lines. Now, it gets more complicated than that. If you have time, those of you who want to hear this, there's only one witness who came to Washington who didn't stay to do the task and stand up before members of Congress. And this witness, Tony Craddock, was there and met him, left, or was taken out of the picture. And let me tell you what happened. The morning of the briefings that we did that night for the congressmen and for the other people who were gathered, we did a sort of a round circle. And we had these witnesses there, and myself, and we had our staff there. And what this session was for the first time, all these people were going to tell each other what they were going to say that night to the members of Congress. Before then, they didn't know who they were. And as we went around the circle, we got to the point where we needed to take a break in the morning. And this one man was going to be next to testify or to share with the group. He stood up, came over to me, and shook my hand. It was dripping wet. I mean, absolutely soaked with sweat. And he said, you know, some of my handlers and friends, when I was involved in these operations, have surfaced, which shocked him because they hadn't surfaced in many years. And we go back a long way, and they saved my life a few times, and I've saved theirs. And they're asking me to give them a call and talk to them before I do this tonight in front of these, Dan Burton, who's head of government oversight committee. And I said, well, you do what you have to do. This is a voluntary effort. So he left the meeting and made a phone call, and we never saw him again. He came back to the hotel, was taken out to the Virginia countryside, to an undisclosed place, you can only imagine. And he was brought back after midnight, after all the congressmen had left. And he's left a note under Sherry Adamack's door, which I now have, this note. And he said, these people have asked me, begged me, not to say what you know, Dr. Greer, I was going to say, until they have a chance to reorganize and get ready for this disclosure, because now they see it's inevitable. Now, this is the effect we've had behind the scenes. It's been huge, huge. And he's still willing to do this, but he said they begged him to give them a little more time. Now, what was he going to tell these members of Congress that was that explosive? I'm going to tell you right now what it was. He called me up once and said, I don't know anything about the extraterrestrial issue. I said, well, why are you calling me? I'm the director of CSETI, the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence. He said, well, I've dealt with the other end of it. So what other end of it? He said, the human end of it. And he was referring to the end that utilizes these so-called alien reproduction vehicles, these things you see flying around that aren't extraterrestrial but are made by good old human reverse engineered technology. And what I'm here telling you is that we already have things that look like UFOs, but in point of fact are made by humans. And they are fully operational. And he says, I dealt with the end of this where it was discussed how this could be used to stage a hoaxed extraterrestrial attack on human military assets so the world could be stampeded at the right time into making the choice to militarize space. Now we're talking naming names and kicking ass here, and this guy had the goods. And he says he's so appalled, and it has worried him until he heard me on a radio show or something talk about what we were trying to do. He didn't know what to do about this, but he had decided to come forward. But he was going to expose what I call a cosmic Gulf of Tonkin scenario, a sort of Independence Day scenario that for all the world, the UN Security Council, the President, the National Security Council, the public, the media, would think, my God, there's life out in outer space and they're taking out our KH-11, KH-12 satellites. But you know what? It'd all be run out of an underground facility in Utah using alien reproduction vehicles that look like extraterrestrial assets and aren't. Now, is this something out of a conspiracy fantasy? I wish it were. When I learned of these things, and by the way, I've heard this from more than one of these guys, I went, my God, we are at tremendous jeopardy of being totally deceived by this kind of an operation, and we're defenseless against it. until, and I say this, knowledge is a powerful thing. So what I've done is to put this information into an assessment. I'm doing a new one. I'm writing one right now. It's going to come out soon.